Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Secret Sex Lives of Muslim Women. I'm your host, Salma Hindi. First of all, Eid Mubarak. Ramadan is over. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasts. Shaitan is back and so am I. You know what I'm saying? We have an amazing episode for you today. The episode is about the number one question I get asked. What happened? Why did you take the hijab off? What was it? What was it that made you take the hijab off? And I have avoided answering this question for so long, but I feel like 5 years after the fact, I am finally ready to answer. First of all, this episode is not an invitation for the haram police or the haters from my hometown or my family to use against me. This episode serves the same intention as every single episode that I've ever recorded, which is authenticity and transparency. That's literally the only reason why I do what I do and why I've shared so much of my life publicly. It's just to let you guys get to know me better, for me to let some of my walls down, and so that you guys have more information on your journeys of growth and self-exploration. Okay, so first things first, why did I take the hijab off? So there's not one reason, okay? I can't just be like, it's just this one moment and this one reason. It was a series of events. So let's take this back to 2020. Well, first of all, I started therapy in 2018 when I was going through literally the worst breakup of my life. And I did have my first suicidal thought. Okay. So that got me into therapy. And I remember my therapist for a long time wanting to talk about my relationship to God. And I was very adamant. I was like, no, we're not going to touch God. Okay. God is the one thing I know. We're not going there. And then in 2020, when the pandemic happened and I was living with someone, I'd moved out of my parents' home and I was living with a roommate. But then the year after that, I believe 2021, the beginning of 2021, I was living alone. And Toronto had one of the worst lockdowns in the world, one of the longest, most intense lockdowns. And so I was completely alone and I was just literally stuck with my thoughts. And I was like, okay, let's talk about God. Let's go there. So I did start to question a lot of things and I did start to have a lot of conversations with friends of mine who I knew grew up religious and then sort of stepped back from the faith. I actually befriended a lot of gay Muslims during that time. I felt that gay Muslims were not really able to reconcile their faith in the traditional Islam that we had learned growing up. And so a lot of them had been on their own journeys and had started to identify as agnostic or atheist, etc., to sort of like reconcile their sexuality with their lives. And so I was very open to hearing other people's interpretations. It was obviously very scary and very overwhelming, but I would say that the first thoughts that I started to have was 8 billion people in the world and only 1.4 billion have the answer. It just seemed really arrogant, you know? And I love Islam so much. I will always identify as Muslim. No one can ever take that away from me. But I don't know. I started to question this idea that there can only be one truth, you know? And so I sort of began my exploration journey. And actually a year prior to that, when I was 28 years old, guys, I loved wearing the hijab, okay? I was not one of those girls that was like, oh, I'm so hot underneath this. And if only you guys can see, like, I made a lot of jokes about that on stage, please. First of all, I love and I miss my hijab jokes. I really do miss them, okay? I was listening to my album the other day. I was watching this documentary that a friend of mine had made about me on Refinery 29. And I was like, damn, I had some really good hijab jokes. Okay. So one of my jokes was how whenever people would say, you're hot. I was like, you fool, you haven't even seen me in my final form. I'm hotter without it, right? Or people would be like, are you hot in that? I'm like, yeah, but I'm hotter without it. So I would just joke, but I didn't actually resent the hijab at all. I really loved wearing the hijab. It gave me identity, it gave me community. Religion also gave me structure, gave me rules, gave me faith beyond a doubt, things you thrive off of as a child growing up. But eventually, I felt like my relationship to religion was impeding my ability to connect with other people, because I felt that in order to be as steadfast and devout as I was, there's no way that you wouldn't be self-righteous. Guys, I was a religious, self-righteous cunt. Okay. The haram police, they crack me up so much. The haram police, whenever they shame me, I'm like, you're shaming me like I don't know ball. I know ball. Okay. I was literally the number one. I was the colonel of the haram police in high school. I was such a fucking bitch. I would judge everybody. I would literally yell at my friends for having boyfriends, for doing anything haram, for not wearing the hijab properly, to the point where my two best friends in high school kept their relationship secret from me all throughout our entire high school lives. And I remember one of them apologizing to me like a decade after, saying, I'm so sorry, it was unfair, like I literally lied to your face. But I was just like, it's okay. Like, it wasn't safe for you to tell me, because I would have started screaming at you. I would have started like verbally and emotionally abusing them. And that's because that's what I was subjected to at home, right? It's not like I learned that out of nowhere. But basically, my point is, I loved being a religious, self-righteous cunt. I loved wearing the hijab. It made me feel really cozy, honestly, to belong to a community as tight-knit as the hijabi community. But then eventually, when I started asking questions, well, first of all, let me take you to the first moment I ever experimented without the hijab. So a lot of hijabi girls I knew that I was really close friends with in the community, a lot of them would go on what they would call hocations, where they would go on vacation to another city or another town where nobody knows them, and they would take the hijab off and basically vacation completely in like bikinis without the hijab, etc. I never did that ever. I never felt called to do that. I think something like that would have scared me, but I had the idea in my head. I also had never masturbated ever, but my hijabi friends did, and they would talk about it. Just so you guys know where I was in the halal haram ratio, I was like way more halal than haram than most of the hijabis in my community. Okay. So when I was 28 years old, a month before the pandemic happened, so this would have been like February 2020, I was very overwhelmed with the pace of my life. I was traveling a lot. I was working as an engineer. I was doing comedy. I was just always on the go, on the move, and I was tired. And so I booked a weekend getaway for myself in this random town like 3 hours west of Toronto called Port Stanley, just like the whitest name and town you could ever imagine. And while I was driving there, I did not plan this, okay? But while I was driving there, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to wear the hijab. And another voice in my head was like, yeah, and you're going to put on a British accent. Might as well, like, no one knows me in this town. So I get to the town, and I didn't even bring anything with me. I didn't even bring like a blow dryer, a straightener. I didn't bring any curly hair products. I didn't bring shampoo or conditioner. Like, I genuinely was not planning on it. I didn't even bring any cute, slutty, sexy tops. I just was not planning on it. And so when I was driving there, that's when I made the intention or the decision. And then when I got to the town, I took my hijab off and I went outside in the daylight without it. And it was my first time seeing people see me without it. And nobody gave a fuck. Literally nobody gave a fuck. I was like, excuse me, why isn't everybody throwing themselves at my feet? The hijab is a barrier to entry and I have removed the barrier. Like, my whole life in Islamic school, I was taught that I am a lollipop. And if I wrap myself up to protect myself from the flies, right? Okay, well, I've removed the wrapper. I was expecting a swarm of flies, okay? Nobody even cared. Nobody even looked at me. But I was like one of the only non-white people in the town. So if anyone looked at me, it was purely because of racism. It literally was not. I was like, damn it. I should have done this in downtown Toronto. But I was scared to do it in downtown Toronto because I could have bumped into anybody that I knew or that knew my family, right? So anyways, I then proceed to have like these 3 super peaceful days in this Airbnb by the water in Port Stanley where I just journaled, I just like painted, whatever. I'm sure I was hurting about a guy. I'm like always 24/7 longing over a guy painfully. But yeah, I remember. And then I went to a bar one night. I was still very heady. Like I never drank or did anything like that. But these 2 like 60-year-old men hit on me. And I remember being like, never mind, I want the hijab back. Wrap me up, my lord. The most standout moment for me, which I have never spoken about publicly, was on the 3rd day, my last morning in Port Stanley. I went to a diner and I bought like this amazing maple syrup that I think I still have with me till this day. I was just eating breakfast in a diner. Okay. And then I had this vision. I imagined my father walking into the diner and seeing me without hijab. And I immediately felt terror in my body that he would freak the fuck out and beat the shit out of me. Because if he did walk in and he saw me, that's exactly what he would have done. And I remember in that moment, I realized that my relationship to hijab is tied to violence. I hated realizing that. I never wanted to ever know that. I never wanted to realize that. I always wanted to believe what I'd been saying my entire life, which is that I chose the hijab, which is true. I did choose the hijab, okay? I wore the hijab when I was 7 years old. I wanted to copy my mom and my older sisters. I really so badly wanted to be an adult. And I wore it. My mom was so happy, so encouraging of it. You know, I got all this positive attention, all this positive reinforcement, which you love as a child. You love attention, especially when it's scarce, when it's a scarce resource in a house with 4 other siblings and so many other family members in and out. But then I have another memory when I was 10 years old. I was wearing it in the summer and it was really hot and I was playing tag or hide and seek or something with my brother and I was running around. I think I was actually playing it with another girl. I don't know if it was like a family member or what, but she wasn't wearing the hijab. I just remember like sweating so much. So I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, can I take the hijab off? Like, I'm so hot. And then my mom goes, no. She goes, sorry, you made this decision. You're going to have to stick to it for the rest of your life. So I wasn't forced into wearing the hijab, but I was forced to not take it off. So that's coercion. You know what I mean? And by the way, let me just say this episode is for the Muslims. This is from a Muslim girl to other Muslim girls. This is not for white people to use to fuel their Islamophobia, okay? And actually, when I first started to question the hijab and question my devoutness and my relationship to religion and to Islam in the way that I'd known it, I was just so upset because I was like, I love that the hijab is also a political identity. It's a political resistance. And yeah, fuck the white man. Like, if you tell me not to wear the hijab, I'm going to wear it even harder, France. Okay, fuck you. Fuck you and how racist you are to Muslim women and Muslims in general. Like, this is not for the whites, okay? They've already done so much damage in the world. This is for the brown girls. This is for the Muslim girls. That is the number one critique that I get in my comedy whenever I talk about the hijab and my relationship to it. People are always like, oh, you're just performing it to a room full of white people who are already racist. And they're obviously going to like encourage you taking it off. But it's not true. White people, they actually really hesitate when I talk about taking the hijab off because they're unsure. They're like, should we encourage or discourage? Like, do we support? If we clap, it's racist. You know what I mean? Their brains malfunction. This is not about them. This is about us. Okay, so I just want to say that. Very important disclaimer for me. So after I got back from that trip, About a year later, that's when I start to have all these questions about my relationship to faith. Also, my relationship to God had become super transactional. I almost like resented God. I know this is terrifying to say out loud. I know all of this is so blasphemous to even articulate, but I'm letting you guys in and I trust you. I trust that you're not gonna use this to hurt me. There's already so many haters, guys. I don't know if you guys know this, but I did perform comedy naked a few months ago in November of 2025. There's an entire Reddit page called Snark Page or whatever, where people are just talking shit about me. And they say things about me factually that's incorrect. For instance, someone said that I have hundreds of views on Pornhub. Where? Can you please show me that video? Like, what? And then people were like, oh, her family was not even that bad. Like, she used to be able to hang out with boys or whatever. But then they conveniently ignore everything else that I've said about being abused my whole life. Also, I'm not going to divulge my family secrets just so that you can validate me. Do you know what I mean? Also, I personally, Salma Hindi, have a very strong resistance to fame and to becoming famous because I'm such a people pleaser and I am a control freak. And I know that when you become famous, when you hit a certain level of fame, you will never be able to control the narrative. And people will most definitely misunderstand you. And that is a dagger to my heart. Someone who so badly wants to be seen and understood. Well, the more I grow, the less I give a fuck about being understood, truly. By the populace, by the masses. People are going to amplify whatever parts of my story serve their agenda, and they're going to completely ignore the other parts that they're ignoring in their own lives. Anybody who says my family's not that bad is clearly in a very abusive family dynamic themselves. So I started asking questions. My relationship with God was very resentful. It was very transactional, my relationship to God. I was also around a lot of hypocrisy growing up where, like I said, the hijabi girls would do vocations, they would masturbate, and a lot of hijabi girls, believe it or not, were having sex. Full out sex. They were giving blowjobs, they were receiving oral, they were making out, they were doing everything but, you know what I mean? I was not that. I was the least hypocrite out of everybody I knew in the community. And that's why I was such a self-righteous cunt, because I was like, I have more of a credibility or I have more of a right to speak on religion because I'm practicing it the most accurately. Everybody else was just pretending. Everyone else was living a double life. You know what I mean? I was maybe like, my hypocrisy was literally that I would listen to music. You know what I mean? But whatever, my parents kind of knew. And also everybody was listening to music. Like, let's be for fucking real. I was not rebelling in the way everybody else was. And so I developed a really transactional relationship with God where I was like, I'm abstaining from all of these things, but you better reward me in the exact way that I want at the exact time that I want. So for instance, the more invites I turned down to shisha, to hookah lounges, because I never smoked, the more abs my future man better have. You know what I mean? I was creating like this transactional scoreboard almost in my head without realizing. And it was disconnecting me from my conscience. It was disconnecting me from the human experience. Like I remember, I think, telling one of my friends who I was talking to about this, and he grew up Catholic, but he then identified as atheist. I remember telling him like my cat was pissing me off and I was like feeling some rage, but I was like, oh, I'm not gonna like abuse my cat for God. And he was like, what the fuck? So you're not like, it's transactional still. That's like really dark. Obviously, like I'm not abusing my cat, don't worry. But I remember like that was an example of something that I had felt where he was like, so you're not actually doing it because of like kindness or tenderness, like you're doing it for God. Does that make any sense? Because it's almost like externalizing or triangulating another force in your own conscience. And then it was just the arrogance, like I said, I remember growing up, I was very isolated. I was only around Muslims. I never had any non-Muslim friends. Like even in college, I would have, non-Muslim colleagues in engineering, but most of them, if I'm being honest with you, were brown. They were Hindu. They were Sikh. Like they were also from cultures that had a lot of sexual shame, and we were all kind of similarly sheltered and isolated. I wasn't really friends with like the wild whites, you know what I mean? And I spent most of my time in the MSA, the Muslim Students Association, where everyone was finding their boos and their husbands, and where almost everybody got snatched up and married but me, which is so crazy. Like it was my biggest dream to get married at like 20, 21 from somebody in the MSA. And I really wanted to. And I had a crush on the MSA president for like 3 years. But, I just was not in a mentally stable place. Like I could never, ever, ever have truly allowed somebody to love me because I didn't love myself. I never sexualized myself. So I would always have like these intense crushes, but I would keep them away because I would make sure that they friend zoned me basically because I was afraid of anything real. So anyways, my point being, all the girls got married and they are married and they have kids. And I mean, now over a decade has passed. I don't know if they regret it, because now I'm like completely free. I'm almost like living a teenage life in my 30s, which I never got to live in my teens. I really don't know like who won and who lost. But at the time in my 20s, it really felt like I lost. It really felt like everybody got their husband, everybody got to move out of their parents' house, everybody got to start their new life, everybody got to have sex. I don't know if it was good sex. I have no idea what the hell the girls were dealing with at the time. Like we didn't have the word for vaginismus that we do now, so I just can't imagine that it was easy for a lot of them. But whatever, at the time, me, I wasn't chosen, and that felt like hell. That felt like I lost, and I started getting really resentful of God. Like, how come not me? How come everybody got a husband and not me? That's so unfair. I'm way more religious. I'm way more like academically successful. I'm way more whatever the hell you want to say. Like, I guess the only thing I would attribute it to was that I was not necessarily like as sexually attractive or as sensual as a lot of those girls at the time, because I had a lot of body image issues. I was very insecure about my body. I was pretty overweight, and that was probably what I was like blaming it on. But ultimately, I was really, really upset that I just couldn't get what everybody else had. And I remember I got into my like only relationship when I was 26, and then we broke up when I was 27. That's when I started therapy. I remember like literally putting so much pressure on that guy. I did love him, but like whatever, he was a coward, and his mom literally called me a whore, and she called my dad a terrorist. And sometimes I'm like, she's not wrong. I said it to my roommate, and he's like, that's how they bring you up on stage. They're like, ladies and gentlemen, this next comedian, she's a whore and her father's a terrorist. Please welcome to the stage, Salma Hindi. So funny. I mean, everyone in the comments, they're like, his mom knew. His mom knew. I mean, whatever. At the time I was very practicing. I was very innocent, but I think I've always presented online a lot more like slutty and whorish than I actually am. Even when I was a hijabi, I was always provocative, which is actually something that I get from my dad. I'm so similar to my dad, by the way. Like my dad is definitely a fanatic, and I'm also a fanatic, but in the other direction. You know what I mean? We just could not have more different values than each other. So when his mom said you can't marry her, he was super codependent on his mom. He couldn't make a decision on his own to save his life, certainly not a decision as big as marriage. And he also felt the pressure from me because he was kind of like my last card, like the only person I had ever loved and been attracted to that my parents could have approved of. Oh my God, I put so much pressure on him, and he just couldn't take it. Honest to God, he couldn't do it. So he backed out. And after that, I was like, what the fuck? After that was when I actually started to kind of reconcile sex, thinking, I just remember loving him so much. And we didn't do anything at all in that relationship. Like we only held hands and like cuddled. We never kissed or anything like that. We never did anything sexual. Like one time I sent him a thirst trap, literally like a photo of my neck from here to here. So there's like a little bit of cleavage and like some hair in the back. He freaked the fuck out. He didn't answer me all night and then sent me like an essay at 6 a.m. telling me like, how can you send me this? I feel so much guilt looking at it. And then that was when I freaked the fuck out. And that was when I had my first ever suicidal ideation. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, this is not normal. This is not normal. And I can't be the only one in the world experiencing this pain and this loneliness and this shame. So I remember that's when I was like, I need to go to therapy. And I told myself, Salma, for the first time in your life, please just put your identity of being Muslim on the shelf. Just put it on the shelf and just go figure this out. And I did. I went to therapy. She helped me so much for the first few years. And I was still devout and I was still practicing. But I remember I was like, I love this guy so much. I can't imagine that me having sex with him is evil. What? How can you tell me that having sex is evil when it's such a pure, beautiful expression of love? Meanwhile, the motherfuckers in my family, the men that I'm around, are literally abusing women, are being such fucking hypocrites, are denying justice for so many of my family members, are literally taking so much advantage of the most vulnerable people in my community. But somehow they're religious and they have all this clout in the community. Like, fuck off. But then it's so haram for me to like want to kiss my boyfriend, for me to want to have sex with him. Like, How is that the same? You know what I mean? So I remember when I came out of that relationship, I started to reconcile the fact that I didn't think that sex was haram, but I didn't do anything. Like, I really did not do anything sexual at all until I took the hijab off. Well, not true. My first sexual experience, I was hijabi and it happened with a friend, but it was so unexpected. It was with a girl and I did feel so much shame afterwards, but I didn't really like consider it sex probably because of misogyny, where you're like, if it's with a girl, it doesn't count. If there's not a dick there, it doesn't count. You know what I mean? But that was toward the end of 2020, I believe. So it was after I had like explored with the hijab. So I was starting a little bit to explore. So like I said, I never knew any non-Muslims. I wasn't really friends with any non-Muslims until I had started comedy, which I started when I was 25. I remember my mom would always say like, oh, the kuffar, the infidels, they are they're not looking for God. They're lost. They don't have any meaning. They don't have any purpose. They just give into their indulgences, which is alcohol and drugs and what have you, and sex, right? But then when I started comedy, that was like the first time I met, I don't know, a Jewish person. That was the first time I met a trans person. I met a man who was transitioning into a woman in front of me, and I befriended them. And I just was like, what are you talking about, Mom? Like, everybody I know is looking for meaning, is looking for purpose, has all the same existential thoughts that we have. Like, what are you talking about? We're all so much more similar than you could ever imagine. I remember reading this chart that was showing the differences between indigenous beliefs and European Eurocentric beliefs. And basically, it was, the beliefs was that, for instance, the earth doesn't belong to us. Nature is a responsibility for us to take care of. And then the Eurocentric belief was that land belongs to man. And then it was like, it just kept showing me like the contrasting beliefs. And I remember agreeing with all of it, except for there was one that the indigenous belief was that there's multiple truths in the world or in faith. And the Eurocentric belief was that there's only one truth. And I remember being like, I can't really reconcile that with my Muslim faith, because Muslims believe there's only one truth, right? Which is Islam, and that there's only one God, and that Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. So I remember being like, what? But everything else that the indigenous people preach and believe is really speaks to me. So how come this one doesn't, right? Forget about asking any questions in my household or in my community. If you ever asked any questions regarding faith, it was always like, what, you think you're better than God? It's like, no. Do you think you're better than God? Like, why are you shutting down any curiosities that I have? Also, it was like a known thing in the Muslim community. We were always warned against ever taking philosophy. We were never allowed to take philosophy in college. And even in the MSAs, they would largely caution against anybody taking a philosophy course. Why? They said because it can make you become atheist. It can make you leave religion. But isn't the first word in the Quran iqra, read? Isn't Islam really big on seeking knowledge? And then I was told, oh, well, there's some good knowledge and there's some bad knowledge. I don't know. Seems control-y to me. Seems like there's an agenda to me. In the words of Candace Owens and that viral TikTok sound, seems kind of gay and fake to me. And there will be no gayness and no fakeness here. I love the gays, please. Those were kind of like my initial thoughts. That's kind of what I was dealing with. I'm just kind of giving you guys the context. And then I watched a 30-minute video in Arabic by an Egyptian YouTuber about the origin of hijab. Okay? This video was sent to me by a friend who had taken the hijab off a few months prior. And she told me that the video really changed things for her. And it also really changed things for me, honestly. When I watched the video, it was such a well-made video. By the way, that YouTuber, that creator, is currently in Europe. He had to seek asylum from Egypt because they just went after him because they're like, you're dangerous. You're making people question religion. Anyways, that video spoke about the origin of hijab, and it shared a lot of things that I had never known. All of it is referenced and fact-checked. Like, he's not making anything up. But basically, he talks about the wording of hijab in the Quran. The verses, idrabu bikhimarihinna ala juyubihinna. Khimar is not, it's not agreed upon what that means. If it's a barrier, if it's a fabric, if it's something you wear. Juyubihinna also is not agreed upon what it means, if it's your neck, if it's your head. And he's like, it's kind of vague and ambiguous wording. And then what really stood out to me was that it was revealed initially for the Prophet's wives because one of the Sahaba, one of the companions, was like obsessed with one of the Prophet's wives and was like legit like following her and stalking her and would look at her. And so then God revealed that verse to the Prophet, basically saying like, put a barrier between your wives and these men. So I think finding that out was really hard. And then also the fact that he talks about, you know, my parents are from Egypt. My mom never wore the hijab ever growing up. It was not common. She actually wore it when she was in college because her sister died suddenly of appendicitis. She was sick on a Wednesday. By Sunday, she was dead. My mom's family, and she was like in her early 30s. And she was truly in her peak beauty, in her peak everything. She was a doctor. She had a 3-year-old daughter, my cousin. My mom's family went into shock after her sister died so suddenly like that. And so I think my mom's trauma response was to put the hijab on. But it was like a fake putting the hijab on because she took it off like a year or so later or whatever, a few years later for her wedding. My mom was not wearing her hijab during her wedding photos. Yeah, my grandma, my dad's mom, never, ever, ever, ever wore the hijab. Actually, they used to look at the hijab like it was a sign of being low class. And then in the video, the guy talks about how hijab was spread in Egypt and Iran in the 80s at the same time by the Muslim Brotherhood. And actually, they had tried to introduce that concept of hijab, I believe, a decade or two earlier in Egypt. And the president laughed in the Muslim Brotherhood leader's face. He said, your daughter and your wife don't wear it? And why don't you make them wear it first before you make the women in Egypt wear it? Anyways, in the 80s, somehow they convinced them that it's fard, it's obligatory, and it's part of the religion. And so hijab spread in Iran and Egypt in the 80s at the same time. I remember watching that video and being like, you mean to tell me that religion is political? I can't believe it took me 30 years to realize this. I was so shocked. I was so devastated. He then goes on to critiquing kind of the argument, the misogyny around hijab, where it's like men put the onus on women, right? Like, you arouse me and I don't want to be aroused. So the onus is on you to cover yourself and to not arouse me. It's giving, oh, he raped you because you were wearing a short skirt. I've always been a feminist, and I know every hijabi that I know is a feminist. Like, I know this. Please, I know. But just take a step back for a second and just consider this. Just for 1 second, you know? And then he ended the video by saying, you guys know what a fatwa is. A fatwa is when an imam or a religious scholar gives a new religious decree that is different or controversial or unusual in comparison to what everybody has been practicing in the past, right? So he pointed out that there were many things in Islam that were halal or obligatory until the general global populace started to drift away from it. And then eventually religious scholars would issue fatwas that would go against what they initially said. For instance, slavery was halal and was so normal in Islam until the World Health Organization or the UN outlawed it. And then all of a sudden, the imams and all these scholars started issuing fatwas saying, oh, Islam's always been against slavery. Music was always seen as haram for so long until recently. There have been a lot of fatwas saying, oh, it depends on the kind of music. Music, as long as it's not music with bad words, music can actually be really calming to the soul. So then he makes the argument. He says, what if you wear the hijab your entire life thinking it's obligatory, and then the day you die, they issue a fatwa saying, we misunderstood this whole time. It's actually not obligatory. And then everyone starts taking it off. Will you have wasted your life? And I just remember being like, at the end of the day, like, the decision has to be yours, has to truly be yours. You know what I mean? Not out of fear that my dad's going to walk into a diner and beat the shit out of me, or out of fear that my mom is never going to be able to look into my eyes again, which is the truth and my reality, you know? But just like, I did this for me. And I remember, like, when I finally realized that I need to take the hijab off, which wasn't even after that video. It was after I talked to my therapist about it, and I was like, okay, let's look at all the reasons why I'm wearing hijab. I'm wearing it because it's familiar to me. I'm used to it. I used to wear these huge buns under my hijab, and I loved it because I could control my head to body ratio. You know what I mean? I loved it. I was so comfortable in the hijab. I had like 5 boutique stores worth of hijabi expensive clothes that I'd collected over the years from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, from like everywhere you could possibly imagine. Stepping away from that, saying goodbye to that was so devastating. Like, the fashionista in me was so sad. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to like style my hair or anything. But okay, so I was wearing it because it gave me a community to belong in. It was a political resistance symbol. Like I said, fuck you to the white man. It was to make my parents happy. It was to gain credibility, social clout in the community, because when you're a hijabi and you want to say something about religion, people be listening. If you're a non-hijabi and you want to say something about religion, everyone's like, bitch, shut the fuck up. You're not even wearing the hijab. You know what I mean? all these reasons are outside of me. They're external to me. They're not for me. They're not for me. Even if I would convince myself it's because it's for God, it was still polluted by all of these external pressures. And the day I made the decision to take the hijab off was the worst day of my fucking life, because I was like, I'm going to go through war. And I did. I literally lost everything. And sure, I could have done what so many other girls who take the hijab off do, who didn't necessarily have my journey with faith at the same time as removing the hijab, because for me it's intertwined, right? And anybody who knows me knows that it's intertwined. Come on. Anyone who knows me knows it's not just the hijab. Like, it's deeper than that. And they were right. They were correct. I just didn't feel safe to ever confirm it or talk about it before. But my dad, he would have wished for me to meekly take the hijab off. And, just show my hair, but continue to wear long sleeves, continue to cover up my body, continue to be like a shy, meek little innocent virgin. And say, my dad, he literally told me, if you go out in the public and say, I took the hijab off because I'm weak in my faith, I don't have the discipline to wear it, God is testing me. If you went and said that you're weak and that's why you took it off, then he could support me. He could tell everyone, oh, my daughter, she's not as strong in her faith, God is testing her, whatever. But I said, no, it's the opposite, Dad. It's the opposite, Daddy. I'm actually one of the strongest fucking women you will ever meet in your life. And it's because of my courage and my bravery that I'm making this decision. And if I ever wear the hijab ever again in my life, great. I came to it myself. It's my decision, purely my decision, without any influence from my parents or my extremely judgmental community that I grew up in, So, yeah. And my dad, by the way, would wish for me to be a whore in secret and keep that shit under wrap like every other hijabi that I knew growing up, rather than to have sex once in my life and never shut the fuck up about it on stage, which is literally what happened. I've had sex literally twice in my life and I never shut the fuck up about it, because it's not about that. It's about the fact that I feel like I've been lied to my whole life and I've been controlled, and I'm angry. I am very angry at the men who did this to me or who led me to believe all of these things. And instead of these same men supporting and standing up for the most vulnerable people in the community, they just use their power to fuel their own egos and to gain attention and to gain clout. Like, I have zero respect for them. Actually, the best Muslims I've ever met in my fucking life are not even Muslim. I would tell my friend Neda all the time, shout out Neda, I love her. She's bisexual, Iraqi, Assyrian. I would tell her all the time, you're the best Muslim I know. She's not even Muslim. But the prophetic traits that she embodied, my family could never. My family could fucking never. And literally, one of my roommates, whom I'm obsessed with, I tell him, I'm like, you're a better Muslim man than any of the men I grew up with. Honest to God. And he's not even Muslim. He's a random ass fucking white dude. After I watched that video and then I realized that all of the reasons that I'd been wearing the hijab were outside of me, that was when I made the decision to take the hijab off. And it was a very, very difficult journey. First thing that I did was tell my parents. I told them in April of 2021, I said, Mom and Dad, I'm going to take the hijab off. And my dad was like, I fucking knew it. I saw this coming. Because my dad never ever wanted me to do comedy, because he's like, it's going to open up your brain and your mind. And he was right. And so when I told him, he was literally like, he was just like laughing. I'm sure it was his defense mechanism. He was like, this is his worst fucking nightmare was coming true. And he was trying to talk me out of it, blah, 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 blah. He was like, we're just going to have to watch you basically go to hell. Just like Prophet Noah's son, who refused to get on the ark and then he drowned. that's literally what we're just gonna watch you go to hell, basically. That's what my dad said to me. And then he couldn't even let it go there. He was so fucking petty. He started telling me about this woman that's like messaging him, which whatever, that's a whole other thing. Like all these women who message imams being like, Imam, I have a question. Can I ask a question? That's kind of shady to me, by the way. That's kind of shady. But, oh, well, you're just answering her religious Islamic questions, but then I'm not allowed to like text a boy. Fuck off. Once again, fuck off with the hypocrisy. So apparently there's this woman texting my dad, and he tells me about her, and he says, she's better than you. I said, what? He's like, yeah, she's better than you because she doesn't wear hijab now, but she aspires to wear it. So she's going to move up in her religion, whereas you're moving backwards in your religion. So she's better than you, and she's prettier than you. I was like, what the fuck? He goes, yeah, anyways, you're not even pretty. What, you think you're going to take the hijab off and be pretty? Well, you're not. I was like, okay, Dad, let's see this fucking woman. So then he pulls out his phone to like show me her picture, and he's scrolling through their conversations, but he's not scrolling like this. He's scrolling like this. I was like, what the fuck? You didn't even talk to me that much. Like, who's this woman? And then my mom starts agreeing with me at that point. He's like, yeah. She goes, yeah, who is that woman? And even though my mom was literally shit talking me the whole fucking time, he pulls out the woman's picture. You know that Snapchat filter that like squishes your face and has 17 hearts? That's literally what he was showing me. I was like, okay, so she's catfishing you, number one. God. But anyways, I was really, really hurt after my dad said that to me. I remember calling my friends on the phone after and like crying, and I like drove over a curb. Like I was really delirious. I was just really upset that he could possibly stoop so low to like attack my self-esteem. And it's also like, you know, whenever I would confront my parents about the abuse that they inflicted upon us growing up, they would always, you know, obviously the typical gaslighting. We can't do anything right. We tried our best. Blah, blah. Oh, so I'm evil. Oh, so I've never done anything good in my life. You know, that the classic trip that they take you on. They would always say like, well, we tried our best and we did what we knew and whatever. And people always say, oh, your parents tried their best. No, they fucking didn't, dude. Because in that moment, he knew what he was doing. And he fucking attacked my self-esteem. And I was like, okay, so you're not actually trying your best. You're just a shitty person and you're continuing to be shitty, you know? So anyways, first of all, it has taken me so much healing to be able to call out my father like this publicly. Like, I think it's the influence of being around white people who, you know, white people are the only fucking people in the world who can say to their parents, fuck you, mom and dad, which is insane. It literally instills terror and fear in my fucking body, because if I ever said that to my parents, like, I would be dead. I would quite literally be dead right now. They would have beat the shit out of me. But white people are actually able to individuate from their parents and look at their parents like actual humans who decided to play a role of being a parent by bringing us into this world. They're the ones who made that choice, by the way. They brought us into this world. And so now we are their children. We get to hold them accountable to that role that they chose. They chose to be our parents. So now we get to tell them, well, you're being a shitty parent. We get to do that, okay? I think Muslims need a lot more irreverence. We need to be able to look at our parents and say, fuck you. Obviously, that's not going to happen for like 100 years or something. And I'm not saying be disrespectful, but I'm saying fuck this stupid honor-based hierarchy system that we all adhere to. Like, what? Our parents are human beings with a responsibility to us, and they are fucking up. I was crying last week because my dad sent me a stupid email basically saying like, you're doomed if you don't recover, if you don't repent during Ramadan. And then I was crying outside on the street at like 2 a.m. and my roommate came home and he saw me. And then He's like, what's wrong? I was like, my dad sent me an email. It was his first time seeing me cry. And then he's like, do you want a hug? I was like, yeah. And he gave me a deep hug. And then while he was hugging me, he goes, I hate your dad. I was like, did you just say I hate your dad? He's like, yeah. I was like, that's the sweetest thing you've ever said. Truly, truly. Anyways, that was a lot of shit talking. That was a lot of me letting you guys into my brain, letting you guys into the journey that I went on. And once again, I've done so much healing. I'm also not waiting for my dad to take me back anymore, which is why I have this courage that I have right now. Like maybe a year ago, I wouldn't be able to say all of these things in hopes that one day he would choose me. But fuck that. I'm not waiting for him anymore. I'm giving myself permission to experience joy and to experience love and to go and live my life and establish my career and make money however the hell I'm gonna make money, you know? I no longer feel guilt anymore for living without him, honestly. So that's why I'm able to say all of these things. And I want to let you guys know, like, I love you. I love Muslim women. I love my community. And I apologize sincerely for all the women whose hearts were hurt by witnessing my journey and witnessing my anger and my rage toward the Muslim men who raised me. That was not intended to ever land on you. That was not intended to ever hurt you. I love you guys so much. There's so much beauty in religion as well. Like, one of the most beautiful memories I have in my body, the most high I have ever gotten in my life, was when I was in Medina. And I was in the mosque, I was in the haram at like 2-3 a.m. in Medina and Munawwara, just reading Quran. I was memorizing, I think I was revising the first 2 chapters of Surah Al-Baqarah, which I had memorized. And I just felt a high that I have never, ever been able to recreate with any drug or anything. And no one can take that away from me, you know? My relationship with Islam, there were so many beautiful moments. I would wake up in the middle of the night a lot and pray tahajjud at 3-4 a.m. And it was such a beautiful practice because it was like everyone was asleep, so there was no distractions. But then I was still kind of like in between consciousness enough to like really tap into my subconscious and to really pray for the things that I wanted. And honestly, when I was really praying a lot, that's when I had a lot of success in my actual worldly life. And I do miss prayer and I do want to get that back. But that's private, you know? The hijab, unfortunately, is very public, and therefore people can pass judgment on you, can harm you emotionally, verbally, physically even, if you choose to step away from it. But prayer, that's between me and myself. You guys will never know if I'm praying 5 times a day again or not. And I love that. I love that it's private. I love that it's between me and me. To the Muslim women, just know I will always love you. I will always defend you. It's me and you. Like, there's no separation between us. Like, the white men are not gonna fucking care when they're rounding us up and throwing us in Trump's concentration camps. They're not gonna care if I'm like, no, I used to be religious and now I'm not religious. Honey, we're the same. We're the same. All the women in my family wear hijab. My nieces all wear hijab. I will defend them till the day I die. You get to wear hijab. You get to do whatever the fuck you want. Okay? I love you. I love you. I love you. This is not about you, my anger and my rage. This is just about the fact that I believe we were lied to and controlled, and I don't like that. And I just want everybody to have the full freedom and independence and autonomy and safety to make their own choices that we claim that we have. If it's true for you, then that's great. But for me, I was lying to myself my entire life because it wasn't really true for me. Because look what happened when I did take it off. I lost everything. So clearly my parents' love with me was always conditional, and that's nobody's fault. It's not even Islam's fault. Like, I really, really relate to Iranians who come out of Iran and how much they hate Islam, because I'm like, yeah, you guys' relationship to your government is like my relationship with my father. Both of those entities used Islam to abuse us. And therefore, we had a lot of rage come out against it. But it's not Islam. It's just Islam is the tool that my abusive father used to try to control me. I am Muslim. I'm always going to identify as Muslim. But I'm not the same as I was before. But I am still me. I'm still Salma. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. It's very near and dear to my heart. And I think it's huge that I let you guys in like this, truthfully and honestly. And if you guys resonated with this episode, feel free to send it around. Feel free to rate our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on TikTok and Instagram and leave a review if it spoke to you. Please donate to our GoFundMe just to cover our studio costs for the end of this year. This episode was shot at 30 Irving Studios in Manhattan, New York. I've been your host, Salma Hindi. We will see you next.